As you can see from all of my little marks in these books, this book I really appreciate a lot of what is said in this one. This is John Shelby Spong's The Fourth Gospel, Tales of a Jewish Mystic. He says here, again and again, the fourth gospel drives home its point. God is not an external, distant entity. God is a life we enter, a love we share, the ground in which we are rooted. The call of Christ is not into religion, but into a new mystical oneness. The death of Jesus will not be the end of his life. It will be the moment when the meaning of God is ultimately revealed, the moment in which Jesus will be glorified, because the world will see God in him when he is on the cross. There Jesus will reveal God as the portrait of expanded life, limitless love, and enhanced being. Nowhere does John give credibility to the dreadful, guilt-producing, and guilt-filled mantra that Jesus died for my sins. There is rather an incredible new insight into the meaning of life. We are not fallen, we are simply incomplete. We do not need to be rescued, but to experience the power of an all-embracing love. Our call is not to be forgiven or even to be redeemed. It is to step beyond our limits into a new understanding of what it means to be human. It is to move from a status of self-consciousness to a realization that we share in a universal consciousness.
Today's reading is John chapter 17, 17 to 23, a passage which involves Jesus praying not only for his disciples, but for all future generations of followers. Consecrate them. Make them holy through the truth, for your word is truth. As you have sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. I consecrate myself now for their sakes, that they may be made holy in truth. I don't pray for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all may be one, as you, God, are in me, and I in you. I pray that they may be one in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. I have given them the glory you gave me, that they may be one, as we are one. I in them, you in me, that they may be made perfect in unity. Then the world will know that you sent me, and that you loved them as you loved me.
Would you pray with me? Ancient One, just as sure as we all breathe the same air, so we are all within you and within each other. Help us to continue to absorb this deeper understanding of spirituality and of being and of connection with you. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be filled with your grace and your wisdom. Amen. So let me start by asking you a question. What makes a really great teacher? What makes a really great teacher? You've all had teachers. A lot of you have been teachers.
Patience.
Patience. Okay, top of the list. Understanding.
Compassion.
Making learning fun. What was that? Caring. Compassion.
She likes it.
So that somebody likes that they like you.
Direction.
Direction. They keep offering you direction, guidance. Challenge. Julie?
Finding strength.
They help you to find strength?
Yes, finding strength in the learners. And also be open to learning.
Okay, so a teacher also finds strength from those they're teaching and is open to learning from those they teach. Jerry?
They meet each person where they are.
They meet each person where they are.
They make what they teach relevant.
They make what they teach relevant.
They empower people.
They empower people. So it's not about the teacher doing for you, it's about you learning to do for you, to give you confidence.
Motivating.
To motivate.
Someone who listens.
Someone who listens instead of just imparts, let me impart my wisdom upon you. Yes, somebody who listens.
They enjoy what they're doing.
They enjoy what they're doing.
They're loving.
They're loving. I think you did pretty good. Brenda.
Someone who has they have charisma, they have the ability to teach the most boring subject.
Someone who has the charisma to take a boring subject and make it exciting, which was not my philosophy professor at college, let me tell you. Julie?
The ability to give healthy feedback to help the student grow.
So the ability to give healthy feedback to help a student grow without making them defensive and turn off to you. Sure?
Make something complicated easy to comprehend.
To take something complicated and make it easy to understand, so that each person learns and grows. And for the most part, our teachers hope that that knowledge will be taken outside of the classroom, right? That this is preparing you for life, for something greater. Y'all remember the Karate Kid movie?
Oh, yeah.
Has anybody not seen the Karate Kid? Because that's your homework. Yeah, that's your homework. So the Karate Kid's about a kid. This is all for Ron now. It's about a young boy named Daniel who's new in town, and of course he gets bullied, right? And he's bullied by the gang of karate kids that belongs to this one karate club, who's led by this master who's an arrogant, egotistical, power-hungry, only wants to be, to win the competitions kind of guy. And so Daniel's bullied by all these guys, and then he finds Mr. Miyagi, who was kind of like Yoda impersonated. And he has all of these things that you just said, and a calm about him, and a depth of spirituality about him. And you all already did it, right? Okay. Wax on. Wax off. Wax on. Wax off. What about this one? Paint the fence, right? Not like this. Paint the fence. And so he does all of these things, and he gets all of this housework out of Daniel. Without him knowing he's being taught the karate moves that he needs. And in the process of giving him all of the skills that so Mr. Miyagi's the master, right? Imparts all of these karate skills on this young boy, but at the same time he teaches his soul, doesn't he? By the way he is, with his compassion and his gentleness and his strength. And he listens and he's there. He's like the epitome of who you want your children's teachers to be. But at the end of the day, while all of that instruction is absolutely crucial, necessary for Daniel to succeed, he's got to do it on his own. He has to have been prepared enough to go forth on his own. So at the risk of being blasphemous, I kind of like the comparison of Jesus to Mr. Miyagi. Jesus was all of those things again that you said. He had the patience, and he had a depth, and he had a wisdom that he wanted to share. And while he talked about God and told his stories about God and imparted a great amount of wisdom about God, he was also the example of how to be. He lived it. And he empowered his disciples and anyone who listened to him to be the same, to go forth and share all of that wisdom. Jesus, his goal was was not ever to be put on a pedestal or have a religion named after him or to be worshipped or to have his name on a church somewhere. His goal was to impart his knowledge, his understanding of God and spirituality upon his students and to send them forth to share that. You know, he was the conduit. He was the example. There's a Buddhist story that you've probably all heard, but it's the Buddhist master who's dying. And the disciples are completely distraught and upset, and they don't know what they're going to do without their venerable master. And they tell him this, what are we going to do without you? And the Buddhist master says, I have simply been a finger pointing at the moon. Perhaps when I'm gone, you'll finally see the moon. Because we have this tendency to elevate people. And how many sports heroes do we have? How many actors and actresses have we elevated to some godly status? Or politicians? Or, you know, even good people, the Mother Teresas and the Nelson Mandelas and the Martin Luther King Jr.'s, we've put them up on a pedestal. And as soon as you put somebody up there, it's really kind of convenient because then you're not looking at what they were pointing to, first of all. And second, you kind of feel like, oh, I could never be that good, so why even try? So we've done that with Jesus. We've forgotten what he was pointing to because we've elevated him. We've put him on that pedestal and we've started worshiping him. We've made statues of him and put him up on crosses, you know, up high, unreachable in churches. And the Catholic Church has made him a mediator. Oh, you got to go to Jesus in order to get to God because he's that next step to get there. And we've done that with our coaches and we've done that with our pastors. You know, within the church, you see the nice little chairs up front for the pastors, the throne chairs, I like to call them. I never liked sitting in them, and people got mad at me because I didn't sit in them. But we want to put you up on a pedestal. Would you get up there? Because then you are held to a different standard than everybody else. So I'm standing right here, same level as all of you. We're all the same. We're all held to the same standard. I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, would you pray for me? Because I'm sure God hears your prayers more. You know, you've got God's ear. Like, I'm better than anybody else. Like, I got a direct line or something. Anytime we create a hierarchy to God, to get to God, where some people are closer than other people, whenever we turn Jesus into God, we've completely missed the point of what he was trying to teach us. And what he was trying to show us. So let me take you to the scripture. This part in John is part of what's called the farewell discourses of Jesus. It's like chapters long. In fact, this little portion that Brian read is part of a prayer that is a couple of chapters long. That does not exist in any other gospel. And probably was not said by the historical Jesus. But it's an attempt by the author of John to interpret for us the understanding of Jesus' life and death from the vantage point of a community that was existing 65 years after the death of Jesus. That had gone through the destruction of the temple, that had been expelled from the synagogues. And John is coming at it from a very mystical place. And so in these farewell discourses, which sort of take the place of a Garden of Gethsemane, there is no Garden of Gethsemane in the Gospel of John. There is no praying with the disciples falling asleep, God, take this cup from me. None of that exists in the book of John. Instead, we have this prayer where Jesus prays for himself and his disciples and everybody else who's going to come. And he's praying this sort of, as he's on his way out. This is his last hurrah, his last teaching, his last please God in the author's words. In this particular passage, we've gotten past Jesus praying for himself. And it's part of the praying for his disciples where he says, God, consecrate them. In other words, make them holy and whole by the truth of the word, is what he says, which really sounds like cryptic language. But if we go back to the beginning of the Gospel of John, we understand that Jesus was the Word. We're not talking about the Word being Scripture because there was no Scripture at that time. There was no New Testament at that time. John chapter 1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Word being logos in Greek. As Richard Rohr interprets it, the beginning was the blueprint of the way life could be, and the blueprint was with God, and the blueprint was God. And so in this little part, Jesus is kind of saying, let them be transformed, made whole, made holy by the truth of what I have said and what I have showed them, by the example I have given them. Not by a creed, not by a law, not by a scripture, but the way I have lived and the truth of what I've said to them. And at the very core of what he said to them, the author John believed that the essence of that was that we are all one. He says it over and over and over again in the Gospel of John, and it starts to sound like we're going in circles. Even you had a hard time reading it. It is. I am in you, and you are in me, and God is in me, and God is in you, and God is in us, and I am in God. And my head spins. If they'd only had water and coloring, food dye, whatever it is. How to understand that and how to grasp that. And the message that was left behind as he starts to pray for those who will come, for all of the generations who are coming. What we've been asked is to believe that God was in Jesus and Jesus was in God. And you know why we're supposed to believe it? Because Jesus at that point wasn't on a cross hanging in a church. Jesus wasn't on a pedestal, he was one of us. And so, if you could believe that the teacher had that relationship with God, if you can believe that the teacher can paint like that and is teaching you how to paint like that, or can do occupational therapy, like, if you're teaching them how to do it the way you do it, they can believe they can eventually get there, right? And so if you could believe that Jesus and God were one, and you were human like Jesus, you didn't have him elevated somewhere else, then by golly, you could have that same relationship. Once you realized that God was also in you. And you didn't put God outside of you up there somewhere else. Am I making any sense? Okay. So this was huge concept at that point. Radical, mystical, craziness. Think of the progression of God to that point. Okay, we'll go back as far as the Roman and the Greek gods. Where did they live? Anybody remember the Mount? Mount Olympus. We live on Mount Olympus, right? In the clouds. And then we get Yahweh, Father Sky God, in our Old Testament, who lives in the heavens, and speaks to Moses where? On the mountaintop. And then we have Yahweh, who travels with the Israelites in the wilderness for 40 years. And where does God live then? In the Ark of the Covenant. Right? You all saw Indiana Jones. If you haven't seen that, run. We're having a conversation. Ark of the Covenant. And then when the Ark gets to the Holy Land, we get to Jerusalem, then where is the Ark put? Where is God put then? In the temple. Let's build God a house. A home, and then God will live there. And then what happens in the year 70 to the temple? They destroy the temple. Oh my gosh, what happened to God? Suddenly God, well, God must be everywhere. The Jews have scattered everywhere, so God is now everywhere. But this is one more step past this. Past that. God is within. Oh my gosh. We can't tell people that. If we tell people God is within, they don't have to go to church. Right? I don't know what y'all are doing here or why I'm telling you this. Other than we all like to gather together when we're kind of like-minded and maybe we get some energy and a reminder of this. But so because that was threatening to the church, it was much more convenient when the committee sat down to decide what books went in the Bible, to take all of the mystical books, all of the Gnostic Gospels, the Nag Hammadi texts, some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, take all of those and go, those are heretical. Burn them. Destroy them, anyone you can find. And if you find anybody reading them or teaching about them, kill them. Because we are declaring that Jesus was God. And everybody has to go through Jesus to get to God, because everybody else, we're all miserable, worthless sinners. Okay, so here's the deal. I know this is going to be really hard for you to accept, but I do not have a red phone on my desk that goes directly to God. Shocking, isn't it? You do not need a mediator to pray to God for God to hear your prayers. You don't need Jesus to mediate. You do not need Mother Mary. You do not need the saints. None of them do you need, because you have a direct line to God. You are worthy. God loves you. In fact, God is in you. Sometimes it's helpful to talk to God, but you know, I'm pretty sure God hears what's in us anyways, and our conversation is just for our own benefit, so we get on the same page. Okay, so the one thing Jesus wanted to do was teach people this amazing spiritual concept of oneness, because that concept changes the world. When we don't get it, you know what happens? We criminalize compassion. Did you hear about the young man down on the border who's being charged with 20 years in prison for working with a non-profit organization and feeding people who are dying in the desert and giving them and helping them to heal and giving them shelter? 20 years, for God's sake. Not for God's sake, for Pete's sake. I don't know who Pete was either. And then we've criminalized feeding the homeless in how many cities across the U.S.? And we kill big game for their tusks and their hides and the conquest. And we sell children and we scam old people, and we don't seek understanding, we just judge. And we're all about greed and about power. Why? Because we've forgotten this crazy radical concept that Jesus tried to bring us, that the church has squelched, because they wanted the power and the control of the people. So I'm giving the concept back to you. And it is radical and it is hard to grasp. But it is life-changing. It was then and it is now. It is world-changing when we choose to accept it and live like it. We are one. We are worthy. We are loved. I am in you, and you are in me, and we are in God, and so on, and so on, and so on. Amen.